right.
Morning. I'm Ed Stolniker with Pacific Power Group. We're going to do the client training on our generator system today. Incorporates the backup generator set, the 3 transfer switches, the tap box for load bank / temp gen, and the fire command panel. I'm going to start out with a basic overview of what we have here with the gen set. This gen set is a MTU on-site energy Rolls-Royce machine manufactured in Mankato, Minnesota. This machine is powered by a 13-liter John Deere engine with a marathon alternator end and MTU electronic controls. Sitting under this machine, we have a double wall sub-base tank that holds the fuel with alarming systems on there for levels as well as containment in the basin. So if we get a leak on this, the alarm panel will go off. So being we're here in the front, I'll give you a couple of guidelines on the fuel tank itself. So over here in front, these pipes are set up so that we have the small one as fresh air makeup to allow the fuel to float up and down. If you don't, you'll draw a vacuum and the engine will starve. The next pipe forward is what they call an explosion vent. The explosion vent is set up so that if, for some reason, the fuel ignited, it would allow the pressure inside the tank to dissipate by lifting the cap off way up in the top up here, lifting the cap off and relieving the pressure. The front one, again, is another explosion vent, but that is for the annular space on the front of the tank. The funny piping setups over here on the front of them are designed for, in the event of an earthquake, the fuel will not slosh and shoot back up the pipes. So, the fueling of this here tank goes in through a swing arm overfuel prevention valve. So when the truck company comes in, they will cam lock onto this tank. You have to use a cam lock with this specific style. They cam lock on, they will push fuel in, and the fuel level will come up, and if they put too much fuel in, it will close off and basically shut down their pump.
I've had several of these filled that they come back with a high fuel line.
Yes, that was my...
They want to get as much in there as they can.
That was my next comment. The overfuel limit on this here will trigger an alarm. It can be silenced, but you cannot get rid of it until you burn the fuel back down. So 90% is a recommended maximum fuel on this tank. You have next to this here alarm panel a fuel gauge for the vendor so that they can see how much fuel is in it. There's also another display in on the control panel and another mechanical down on the tank up inside, as we'll see in a little bit.
You know approximately where the low fuel goes off at?
It should be at 50%, yes. Yep. That's a standard. The reason why they do that is because you cannot drive this down to the gas station and top off the fuel. So you're calling a truck as well as, maybe 10,000 other people that are in that same power outage trying to get fuel. So that's why they give you enough time to get fuel back in here before you go lights out. So now everything is all calculated on the actual load that the generator can put out, not the actual load you have connected. So in reality, you're probably going to burn a third of the rating of this machine or less. Most places are lucky to get third load on them. So.
Where would that information be? Exactly what the fuel burnage per hour is?
The fuel burning will be in your O&Ms, which when we get up here, there is a CD of the O&Ms for this machine, and also the cut sheets. So the original cut sheets will give you the 25, 50, 75, and 100% burn rates. So, okay.
EPA, I have to give that to them.
Yep. So, Okay, well, let's move on down the road here, and we'll go a full circle on this guy. Okay, we'll go through this door right here. So, right here is the O&M CD. There may be more copies. I do not know what the original contract was on it, but they put it on CD now, so you don't have to have piles of books. And of course, CD is now going to be going to thumb drive, and yeah, yada. Okay, so this is our John Deere engine. As you can see, we've got a lot of heat blankets and stuff like that, so we can keep the heat out of the enclosure because we don't want to add more heat shoving through the radiator. Gensets, typically, about 90 some odd % of them, will push air out through the radiator. It's more efficient than pulling the cool air in. So it pushes it out. It has a turning hood on the front with sound baffles inside or sound foam inside to quiet the machine down. This side of this here engine, you have our starting system, 24-volt starter with control relay sitting right behind it. This here big silver pipe here is part of your charge air cooler. So basically, when you compress air, you create temperature. And out of the turbocharger, which we'll see on the other side, it pushes that up through a second radiator core, an air-to-air exchanger, to cool it, yes, to cool it down before it puts it back in the engine. Because the cooler you can keep the air, the more oxygen you get into it, the more horsepower you can get. Right underneath the charge air pipe there is the ECM for this engine. The ECM is monitoring multiple points around the engine, speed, temperatures, and pressures, to make sure that this here engine runs up to optimum performance, emissions-wise, fuel economy-wise, and to pull the power. The ECM is talking directly to our control, which is through the next door, and with that, we do not run a second set of sensors on the engine. Old school engines, you had your high water temp shutdown, your high water temp pre-alarm, and your high water temp gauge. This in here, it's all done through the ECM, talking direct to the engine controls, or the genset controls. Right here in, excuse me, right here in front of us is the engine coolant heater. The engine coolant heater serves two purposes. One is, of course, when it's cold outside, it will allow you to start this engine. You get a cold engine, diesel especially, and they will be sluggish starting. The second purpose for this heater is this is an NFPA 110 compliant generator set. This thing will be online in 10 seconds. So you really don't want an engine sitting at 38 degrees to assume your load in 10 seconds. It is hard on engines. Okay. Just inside of the coolant heater, you see this curly hose? That's just the oil drain for the sump on this. They send the hose out. I normally don't use it. I have my own evacuation system, for doing oil changes. Right here in front of you, we have two Group 31 batteries. These are maintenance-free style batteries, so there is no water levels to check or anything like of that nature. The batteries, typically, according to NFPA code, should be replaced out every 30 months. They don't say you have to, they just recommend it. And my saying that I always say is, without batteries, you have a very nice thing holding the slab down, because that's all it's good for if it doesn't start. So, okay. Any questions in this here? Okay, let's move to the next door here. Okay, this is the one that has the brains in it. And it's not just me standing here. Okay, so right over here we have our automatic battery charger. Battery chargers nowadays are 100-fold more intelligent than what you bought even 10 years ago. I mean, they log what the battery's doing. They will put out, it's just like your cell phones. They will put out the desired rate and charge to keep your batteries at optimum performance throughout their lifetime. The battery charger and the block heater disconnects are inside the building on this one. Okay. With the ECM, we have this here, what we call the MGC control panel. The MGC control panel not only monitors engine parameters, it also monitors all of the electrical parameters and the run logs, how much load's on it, all of that stuff. You can basically spend a day going through this thing. The one thing I will tell you about this is as long as you do not punch in the access code, you can do whatever you want.
Can't change it. That's important.
Yep. So within this control, we have two sets of parameters. We have metering and we have settings. So to back up my most recent statement of not getting in there and punching in the code, you can't do anything. Settings is something that I will put in there. You could go in and say, okay, I want my low fuel level to be at 25%. You could change that set point. It's all in there. But you need code. So for the majority portion of it, you will going into the metering portion. Right now, you're sitting on the base screen. So as you can see, it shows what our engine hours are, the fuel level, the engine temperature, the battery voltage, and then up at the top, those will become active when we have the engine actually running. So you'll actually have the voltage average, the amperage average, which phase you're looking at, and the hertz. Okay? Now, this is very intuitive to walk through this here control. It's, doesn't take a whole lot. I'll get to walking through here in a second, actually. Alarm silence. If you have any alarm coming on, low fuel, whatever, you can silence the alarm. It does have a ring back feature. If it reactivates, then the alarm will come back on. Lamp test is just that. It's for, lighting this up. It will turn the display kind of a grayish color. Just make sure everything is working. Down in the bottom right-hand corner, we have three modes. We have the automatic, which is the way this should be left at all times. The off mode. Off mode is basically to turn the machine off. And if you have a shutdown alarm, you have to be in the off mode to reset it. Okay. Then you have the run mode. If you push the run mode, this machine will start up and it will run either until you shut it off or it runs out of fuel or some other factor shuts it down. Okay? I want to sneak around the side. I'm going to go right up to close here. Okay, so control panel. Right now we're sitting on our base screen. So we walk our arrow over. Now you see these two sets of menus that we were talking about. We have metering and we have settings. Okay, the settings, like I said, are parameters that we put in there or the factory puts in there for this machine to operate.
So go to would be exercise.
Exercises comes out of the transfer switch. It can come out of this, but we typically put the exercise into transfer switch. And we'll get to that inside. Okay. So under metering, we have engine parameters. So we just went right one more. We'll go right one more. And now you see this big list. Basically the stuff that we saw on that basic screen, plus some. So you can look at your percent load. Some of these here have an NA in them because it's not applicable with this particular engine. Maintenance is not set on this. We do not have a DEF tank. So back out of that one. Next one is your generator parameters, which is your voltages, amperages, and such. So it's three-phase Y, and all your voltages will come up when we run the engine. Voltage is line to line, voltage is line to neutral, frequency, amperage on each phase. If you were reading a bus, which we do not on this one, you can see what the bus is doing. It does a lot. Vector shift, rate of change. So. Then you go back one more. Now we look at, back one more. Now we look at the power. It's in kilowatts, in kVARs, in kVA. You can read all of these individual little things. This will overwhelm you with how much it will actually read. Total kilowatt, if you want to go and look at your fuel chart, when this is running with your normal loads on it, come in and look at your total kilowatt, and you can figure out what percentage that is of the rating, and you can hit the chart and say, okay, I should be burning about this much fuel. kVA, kVAR, and all that stuff, I mean, if you really want to be techie about it, that's not really going to make a whole lot of difference in the real world. Okay, run stats. Run stats is broke down into 3 different levels. You got cumulative. So cumulative is total from the time this machine was commissioned. Actually, 2 levels there and then 3 within. Under cumulative, you have the total runtime, how much of that was with load, and how much was unloaded. The difference between loaded and unloaded is quite simply the current ratio. So if we have a current transformer in this here generator set, which is probably a 600 to 5, if it hits over 3% of 600, then it will say that it actually is running with a load. So it doesn't necessarily say you're at 50% load or 25% load or anything like that. It just tells you that, yes, it had a load on it. Okay? So you go down and their total runtime is 5 hours and 40 minutes. This does not do tenths on this screen. It's in minutes. Okay. So the loaded runtime is 4 hours and 20 minutes. That was me. I did a 4-hour load bank test on it. Unloaded runtime, 1 hour and 15 minutes. All this here stuff here you can report for EPA on it. Okay, session. Session is the most recent time. So if you come in here and say, yeah, the generator fired up last night, why? Okay. It didn't even elapse any time the last time they did this. Either that or they disconnected the batteries. They might have had the batteries disconnected on it. Because normally it'll say your last run on it. Either that or somebody just bumped the starter. And under session, what time it started, and how many kilowatt hours. So it's 6:14. Yeah. So. Okay, metering. Okay, alarms and status. Now, if you have an alarm come in on this here, you can actually go in and see what they are. So I go into there, active alarms. We have 0 active alarms, 0 active pre-alarms. If you had an active pre-alarm, you could click on it, say battery charger fault, low fuel, high fuel, and you can get the details on that. Okay. Status. So this genset is set up to operate from a contact closure from the automatic transfer switch. So this first one is automatic transfer switch. That's the input. And it says that input is off. If the transfer switch calls for this to run, then you'll see that will say yes. Or yes, yeah. Meaning that it's a closed contact. Once that closes, the gen should start. So it's a good way to troubleshoot. I'll go in here and they say, well, the gen, it's calling for it, but won't start. And I'll walk out here like, yeah, no, it's not. We'll usually find a wire connection or something of that nature. So, and it has a lot of, EPS supplying load, as I was telling you about the 3% on that. And, we do not have a mains breaker on this. The mains breaker is off board in the other cabinet. But you can actually look at the status of all these things. So the same with inputs. I mean, it's endless what you can look at in here. Battery charger failed, fuel leak, coolant level. So, and then you can do the same with your outputs. You know, engine's trying to start, but it's not starting. Well, you can see that yes, it closed the relay, or no, it didn't close the relay. So, then your global alarms, and this here has onboard relays that can be monitored. So basically, you can tie into that relay, and when it closes the contact, it can turn a strobe light on top of this on. You know, things like that. So. And then we get down into stuff, logic control relays. That's if you're writing logic. That's when you use this here for paralleling and, you know, very custom stuff. Configure elements, configure protection. You can actually set it up to, you know, if you get over 50 kW load on it, then you can have it, you know, do something, you know. Then the event log here. It'll give you how many of each thing has happened. Click over on it. It'll tell you the first occurrence, date, and the time, date, and everything on that. So normally with this stuff here, I use a laptop because I can, one, print it all out and sort it in Excel, and two is I can just whip through this here stuff a whole lot quicker because I can sort it by the date and, okay, this is what all happened today. This here, you got to go down each one. So, and the software for this is free. You can just download it. You have to sign up for their account, but it's made by Basler Electric. So yeah, this here's all the different event logs. So this here engine I was telling you is communicating right with this here control. It's communicating on a J1939 bus. So when the engine's running, you can look at some data from this here ECU that's not displayed on the regular screens. Not a whole lot. John Deere doesn't put a lot out there on it, but you can see a few different items on there. You can see the DTCs, diagnostic trouble codes that are in the ECU. Now we have none showing on it right now. It'll tell you what it is. You can clear DTCs. I prefer you do not, because if you have a DTC, you know, we should come out and actually find out what it is. And if you clear it, then we're going like, I don't know. Yeah. So, yeah. And then diagnostics is another one that, you know, you're trying to figure out different communication deals and stuff like that. It's more of a techie thing on that. Again, I use laptops for all that. So that's the bottom of our metering screen. That's the screen that go through, you can look at it, play around, you know, have fun with it, and you're not going to be able to hurt anything. Even if you were to throw a password in, you can't change anything in there. The settings screen, you have general settings. You have where you can set this screen up to auto scroll. You can put things in there that, okay, if you want to go out and have your check sheet that you use on a monthly basis or whatever, and you say, okay, I want the hours first, I want the water temp second, yada, yada, all the way down. You can have that screen set up exactly as your form is. Just go in. Again, it's easier on a laptop than it is through this here, but it is doable. And you can set it to auto scroll, and if you're a slow reader, you can slow that scroll down to, you know, 15 seconds. You know, that's the type of stuff you get in this here general settings. Communications, that there, you're not using Modbus 485 on this. You're only talking on the proprietary bus to the Annunciator. So communications really aren't going to do any good on that. Okay. System parameters, that one we definitely do not want to touch, because that's where I can tell it, I want you to shut down at 165 degrees water temp, and it will. That's how I do my tests on it. So, and then you can set up your programmable inputs, programmable outputs, configure protection, all of that there stuff is within this here settings. You can change passwords. Please don't.
No, I don't touch it.
Okay, so any questions on any of this? So in a nutshell, short of monitoring what's going on here, you're going to be using this little corner down here. If you do get a shutdown, you know, for whatever it may be, you know, high coolant temp, low oil pressure, whatever, the first thing you always do, or e-stop, that's the number one we'll see, the first thing you always do is you clear the reason for that. So if I were to push e-stop right now, the alarm's going to go off. It's going to stay there. We can't get rid of it until we go to the off position here. But you go back to auto, if you didn't pull this back out, it's still there. So you have to clear the reason for the fault before you clear the control. High coolant temp, okay. It should, well, let's go low coolant level. You look up there like, oh yeah, it's low on coolant. So you add coolant to it, yada, you're done, reset the control, put her back online. So. And of course, e-stop is just that. You push the button, she's shutting down. Okay, and this is a handy dandy little lights. It's on a timer, and then it will turn itself off. Inside this control panel are terminal strips, timers, relays. It does carry a rating, arc flash rating. They don't post it on these, but there is an arc flash rating. So if you're going to open the control panel, make sure you've secured whatever you have going on. I mean, opening the door, leaving the door open while the engine's running, yeah, it's tiny wire. In theory, there's not much there, but it is there. Just like any panel on this machine, you know, secure your potential before you go into the panel. So, any questions in here? Yeah. So, this generator set does not have an onboard circuit breaker. Inside this here is just connection points for the conductors going over to the tap box, which sits in front of the engine. So inside here, this really should never have to come off unless you've got a company coming in to do IR scanning or something like that, and then they will have their own specifics on it. Right over just in front on top of the winding, you're going to see the data tags. Up there. The data tags are from MTU Onsite, Rolls-Royce, and Marathon on this here particular set of tags. The MTU Onsite, you can use those numbers and order any part you want off of this machine that was supplied by MTU Onsite Energy / Rolls-Royce Power Systems. If you wanted to go elsewhere and say you want a new voltage regulator, you can go through the Marathon side, or a bearing for it, or yada yada, whatever on it. The same with the John Deere engine. The John Deere engine has its own tags on it. It is basically the bell housing forward, not inclusive of the cooling system, because radiator and all that stuff is not supplied by John Deere. It's supplied by MTU. Okay. Keys for the enclosure. I'm assuming that the general contractor has the handful of keys that this came with. It's a 21 key that fits all these enclosures. So I believe you do have quite a few of these sitting around, so it should not be that hard to find. Okay, so this is basically the service side of the engine. So if you were to climb up here, and it's a climb, you'll get up to the top up there where you got your radiator cap.
Okay.
He's hiding right up on top of that little surge tank up there. And I don't know if you can see it. It's really difficult to see, but there's a goldish colored sensor. That is your low coolant level sensor.
Okay.
If the coolant level drops below that for over 30 seconds, it will shut the engine down.
Okay.
So we have your primary water separator filter with a sensor on it. The sensor is for the water getting in or water sitting in the bottom of the bowl. And it will feed the ECU and tell it, and the ECU will tell the engine or the genset control that you have water in the fuel. Then we have our secondary fuel filter sitting left side there, and that is your 2 micron stripper to get all of the contaminants out of the fuel. This machine should not be pre-filled. If you're going to change the filters, put them on dry. Then you disable the start on it. The start meaning the starter itself. And you push the button to start the engine. Right above this, that roundish thing, that's the fuel pump. And it will pull the fuel through and charge the filters. The reason they do that is because it's very seldom you're going to find that diesel out of the pump is filtered down to what this engine requires. And if you put that into that secondary fuel filter, then you're going to be putting 10 micron particles or something like that in there, which they don't want in there. So, then we have right here the spin-on oil filter. The yellow guy, of course, is the dipstick. It should be kept at or near the full level at all times. The standard oil on this, it will give you specifications within the O&Ms on it, same as the coolant and all that stuff. But in a nutshell, we run 1540 Delo 400 is what our standard is.
That's what I know.
Yep. So both sides of the block here on this one here have shutoff valves. That way, if you need to change the hoses out, you can do it without draining the system. However, do turn off the heater before you turn off the valves, because it will superheat the heater and cause issues. Yep. Okay. Now, if you look over the top here, so right here, you see the second gauge. The second gauge here is feeding that 95% that was shown on the fuel panel, on the MGC panel. It's feeding right off of this here through those wires coming out of the side. And here's our leak switch, so if we get a breach in the primary space, then the leak switch will catch it. The ones over here are for the fuel panel on the front. So these are the ones that are turning on the light on the little gray box in the nose of the machine. So, okay. Reverse. Is the FoxFab tap box. They make a lot of different variations of these. This particular one is set up so that you can not only load bank, but also back this up with a temporary generator set. The main breaker for the generator set, the permanent generator set, is right here in the middle. It should always be left on. You have a slider bar system on this, which will not allow operations, depending on where you're at. So normal operation, power comes from the generator set through this here breaker and goes into the 2 transfer switches that are sitting inside. You want a temp gen online? You can turn this guy on, but now you can't turn this guy on. So. When you fire up the temp gen, of course, you don't have utility anymore. So you need to know what your rotation is. This here has rotation lights on it, which will tell you whether you're forward rotation or not. Standard on most everything built nowadays is they are clockwise rotation. But if you're laying cable out, obviously you can spin them any way you wish. And it's easy enough to get them backwards. So. And again, this behind these panels, unless you have everything isolated out, yeah, don't touch. Because you have no control when this is going to start or not. So. Okay?
Yep. Yep.
So why don't we take a walk inside unless there's any questions? Okay. So we're going to start here on the left-hand side. This is the Fire Command Center. So what the Command Center does is it tells you that what your transfer switches are doing. As you can see, we have the green light on normal position on our EH1 life safety transfer switch. Green light on for SH1, the optional load transfer switch, and the genset is ready. Down below here, we have a control switch for manual start of the generator set. When we start the generator setup, we will get this here generator running light. If, in fact, the generator is not available, shuts down an alarm or whatever, it will come in as fault. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and fire the generator up. It should just turn the light on. Everything should be like it's supposed to. We have the generator closed up outside. We have the boxes closed up. So we will... Generator's running. If you look over here, you'll see we have a red light. It shows that generator power is available and is within parameters to transfer.
Will that be shown on the annunciator and sending alarm or
No,
anything?
no.
So it's still...
Yeah, the annunciator does not monitor the transfer switch.
Even though you're out of auto here?
We're not out of auto.
Okay.
We're still in automatic at the machine.
So that's
We
what's
close that remote set of contacts, the same as what's in these transfer switches.
This is the first one that, first generator I got that's got this
Mm-hmm.
capability.
Yep.
which is
Yep.
nice.
Yep.
Just like your supervisor too.
That the engine's running? Oh, cool. Well, you're welcome. It should have cleared. Okay. Now, these two guys up here will probably upset these two guys over here. What these are is you can basically tell this transfer switch to go to the secondary source, to the generator source. So if I flip this here over to force to gen, this transfer switch is going to come up with accessory 17 on the display, and it's going to start the generator set, and it's going to transition onto the generator. And it will stay there until you turn this back. And I'm not sure where their testing is, so I don't want to mess with them at the moment. On e-power? Okay.
How long do you think it'll, a couple minutes, we can pause for a minute?
Yeah, it'll only be a minute or two.
Yeah, get to a better signal level. Okay, we just got here three, generator people.
Okay. 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 And this is probably be a good one for you to see also, because this panel is controlled by you. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the emergency panel over, because I'm not sure what's going on with the elevator right now, and I don't want to mess with him.
Yeah,
Okay.
the recall's off.
So I'm going to basically, if you came in here and say, hey, I want to put this here, the life safety panel on generator power, we'll go like this. Look over there, we got accessory 17, generator's running, and you're done.
There we go. And then we just got supervisory, generator running. And we got a treble, FACP, AC failure. So,
So now, I have these set up for 30 seconds for test mode, because this here is not an actual outage, it's a forced outage. So when I turn this back, you will see this display come up and it will start timing out. Of course, you see the red light here and everything switched over like it's supposed to. So go back over here. We should see timing. And if you would have been counting, you probably, from the time I flipped that switch until it switched, pretty much what our...
So this is emergency power, right? Not
Yep.
standby power, and that's the standby power?
Yep. And you're back. Now, you'll see over here, it's got a 5-minute cooldown. The 5-minute cooldown, you cannot bypass. They don't let you. The retransfer, say if you had an actual outage on these here, and I believe I left these set for 5 minutes, and you didn't want to wait for 5 minutes, you can. It'll come up and say bypass, and you push it, and it will basically cancel out that retransfer delay, and it'll go back immediately. Yeah. Other than running, we're kind of done with the pounding around on it.
Yeah, all good.
Okay, so the control itself on these here transfer switches are identical. They're both Group 5 ASCO controls. The difference is this one here is set up with the elevator control in mind. So you hear how fast this transfer switch went over. If you have an elevator in motion and it transfers like that, then it's going to basically freak people out. So what they do is they will do what they call a pre-signal. It will basically say, oh, in 30 seconds or 90 seconds or whatever we have it programmed up for, I'm going to transfer. So it will tell the elevator, okay, go down to a floor and open your doors. Then it'll transfer and then everything goes back to normal. That way you don't get people trapped in the elevator and issues like that. That's only in this switch. The life safety switch does not have any loads of that magnitude on it. It's just a little guy. So he has just his standard time delays. So your normal transition on a transfer switch is you have your time delay for engine start. That is utilized so that if you have a blip rather than an actual outage, it's not going to start to gen. Okay. Once that it is passed up that time delay, which is typically 3 seconds, then it's going to say, I'm going to start to gen. Now, once it starts to gen, if the utility power comes back before the gen gets up to acceptable voltage and speed, or the time delay times out, which I have it set at 0, then it would stop everything and just go into cooldown. But if it makes it past that, then it's going to do the transition to secondary source. It's going to sit there on secondary source until the green light over here on this side says, hey, this utility source is good. I'm going to allow you to go back. It's going to start a timer timing. And that's that 5-minute timer going back. If any time during that duration the power blips down again, it's going to reset the timer. So if you got unstable power, you got your generators. Everybody else gets to take all this garbage going down the lines. You have a stable source. Once you have elapsed that full time delay without getting another dip on the power, then it's going to transfer back. This one will have, of course, the pre-signal going with the elevator again. Okay? Then it's going to go into cool down mode. So, pretty straightforward. So, when you go into this here, it looks intimidating, but it's really not. Again, it's the same as the generator set. If you don't put a code in it, you're not going to hurt anything. We're going to go down. So here's our voltages. Not too bad, Justin. You did okay on your voltages here.
Oh, yeah.
So, yep.
That's all PUD.
Yep. So you can see this generator still running. We're matched pretty close to the generator voltage. It should be shutting down here momentarily. Okay. No active alarms. Then it goes back to the beginning. Okay. So, we're going to go this way. So you can read events like you did on the generator set. Tell you what happened, when it happened, the whole 9 yards. Event 2, oh, well, let's go the other way. Go up. There's event 2, and you see there's like 160 events you can go through, so you can kind of track what's been going on. That's what I'll do if they have a transfer switch issue. I'll just go back and start reading the events on it. Escape out. Statistics. Total transfer. Transfer switch transfer time is 24.5 seconds. That's because of the delays in them. Source 2 fill transfers 2. Days energized 74. Time normal available. All sorts of stuff that really, unless you're trying to track an issue, you're probably not going to get into. Settings. Okay, there's one you were after. So, exercise is a funny little animal because you got to figure out what do you want. Then you got to figure out, well, I want it on Mondays at 9. Do you want it with load or without load? You know, all these different things. What is it going to affect and all that stuff. A typical exercise program, if you're going to only run the engine alone, I will put in the life safety switch. It's just my little standard I do. I know where it's at. Not everybody does that. I mean, I could put in either one. If you want to actually transfer the load, these two transfer switches do not talk to each other. So if you want to transfer load on this guy and on that guy, you've got to put a program in each one of them. So and that's something that, I don't know if you're at a point to decide on what you want it on yet, or you're going to wait until it's occupied.
Probably wait until
Okay.
it's occupied. That
So-
way people
Okay.
can get things done. Work,
So to set the exerciser, we're in engine exercise right now, we're going to hit enter. Right now it says there's no program in it. Okay? Or program number, but there's no program that says it's not enabled or anything like that. So, and you can set, I don't remember how many exercise programs in this, but you only need one on it. Some people will try to go and run once a month with load and then every week without load. And that's doable. It kind of gets into a little mind melt on it. So first thing you do is you go down and you check enable. Well, I want to check enable. It asks for the password. The password is in the manuals. I will show you what the password is if you want to turn the camera around.
Yeah.
Okay, so now it'll allow me to enable it. And I would check enable. Okay, I don't want to enable it. So I'm going to go back, go down. Start week. You want to run it every week? Leave it on all. Or, sorry, with load first. Yeah. With load or without load. If you want with load, you would check it. If you don't, you just leave it unchecked. Okay? Then start week would be all weeks, or every other week, every fourth week. You know, you get the day. Okay? Then you go day of the week. You know? You got to pick one of the days that actually end in Y, though. Time is the time it's going to start. 9 o'clock, you put in 9 o'clock. This is should be in military time. Okay? Duration. Without a load, you want the engine to run long enough to reach its normal operating temperature. So if this thing will come up and the engine temperature will stabilize at 165 or whatever, you sit there and watch it, okay, it's stabilized, that's the amount of time you want to run it. Because anything beyond that, you're not really doing anything.
Right.
If you're running it with a load, that's different. I mean, with a load, they normally will put, some people do 20 minutes, some people do 30 minutes. It's all about, you know, who's watching to make sure that everything works like it's supposed to and all that stuff. So. And then you're back to the beginning. And again, you can toggle through and set as many programs as you want in there. So, like I said, if you just want a simple program, just program number one. So, so any questions on that?
I usually just program them, but I usually just do once a month for 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
is what I
With or
was-
without a load?
Without.
Without a load, yep, yep, yep.
And
Now,
they do the load bank test once a year.
yeah, the factory recommended minimum is, or maximum time duration between, I guess you'd call it, is a month, 28 days. They do not want you going beyond 28 days. And that's mainly wraps around the big bore engines because they actually have timers set up in those where if you do not exercise them at least every 28 days, it brings up a pre-alarm on it. Because you got an engine that's worth, you know, $250,000, they don't want it to wipe out bearings. So we're going to go down one. Timers. So I talked about the time delays on these. So normal fail is set for 3 seconds. So that is that proofing to make sure that, hey, the power actually went away. And it doesn't necessarily mean it went away. You lost one leg out of parameters, or at least one leg, okay? And parameters includes frequency. So for some reason, if the hydros slowed down or whatever, and you got below 57 hertz, it would start to jam. Okay? And that is adjustable to wherever you want. Okay? Emergency fail, we really don't worry about emergency fail. That's if we're running and the generator dies, 4 seconds later, it's going to default you back to normal. This can actually be set up for a gen-gen transfer switch also. We'll go down. No, actually one more. Okay, time delay from normal to emergency on failure, on a utility failure, is 0 seconds. Because we want to get that thing going quick. The engine's going to be warm out there and everything. We want to get her going, so we got it 0 seconds. Now, in the test mode, yeah, if you flip the test switch over here, we're still going to leave it 0 seconds, you know. No reason not to. The trick to that one is on the other direction. So emergency back to normal in an actual outage, it's going to run for 5 minutes to proof utility. Whereas if you use the test switch here, it's going to run for 30 seconds because you know utility is good. You just told it you wanted to transfer. And that's that one right there. Then generator cooldown is at 5 minutes. Okay? Now, I talked about the elevators. Now we're getting into pre-alarms. Or not pre-alarms, pre-signals, sorry. Normal to emergency pre-signal is set at 20 seconds. I'm assuming it worked. They tested, I guess, on Friday, and nobody said anything about it. But the idea behind that is it should give them enough time to do whatever function they want on the elevator before it actually transfers. So they've got it set at 20 seconds. Post, in other words, after the transfer, you can also set it up to the after it before you start the operation again on the elevator. And that is set at 0. The elevator company did not request a post transfer. They just wanted a pre-transfer. And here's the other direction. Emergency back to normal. Again, it's 20 seconds. So in an outage, you're going to see that the elevator will shut down for that 20 seconds before it retransfers. Or seek a floor and then shut down. Okay? And load disconnects, you know, we don't use load disconnects on this here. You can to shut motors down or whatever. Same idea as the elevators. Emergency acceptance fail, so if it doesn't see emergency in 3 seconds, it's going to throw an alarm. and then back to the beginning. So, and then we get down into the general stuff. Time and date, communications, parameters, display, set the contrast on it, things like that. You can set your camera on, you can label the location of this thing, all sorts of stuff. So, features. You probably don't want to go and start playing with features because now you're getting into an area where stuff can be changed. You can say, oh, I want this as a closed transition transfer switch. It's not this here platform is not available as a closed transition. To do that, you have to decouple the two halves so that it actually can close both together. So, and then your pickup and drop out, things like that, your set points. Yeah, you can set this here so if the voltage drops, like 2%, it'll start the engine. And that thing will get a lot of hours on it. So like I said, that's really, features is not something you really want to get into unless you really know what's going on with it. The same with factory. Factory, you have to have a different password, but yeah. And then we're back to the beginning. Okay, so that is the operation of the panel looking through. The other operation is your push to test. Your push to test, you have to enter that passcode also. So you're going to push it, it's going to come up, ding, 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 what you saw there, and then push it, and it'll fire up and transfer, and run through its time delay, and then transfer back. Now, you have that same functionality right here. It's not intended for that. This is intended for the fire command, but you have that same functionality. The only
When it transfers, the alarm don't know, right?
yeah, anytime they're seeing when that generator runs. So, but the only difference between this and this is this in here, you go in there and you transfer it over, and then you can walk away. Because 5 minutes later, it's going back. If you use this one, don't walk away. Because you're going to have a hefty fuel bill. Because it's going to stay running until something else shuts it down. So, and of course, the third way of doing this would be open the breaker that is feeding the utility side of this transfer switch. Now, typically, they'll do that on an actual, with the fire marshal here, or the HJ, where they open up that and they'll start to watch timing on it to make sure it makes that 10-second on it. So, make sense?
Yep.
Now, the same as what I was telling you outside. These panels have a arc flash rating for them. You can see the sticker right here. So unless you're wearing, 6.94 cal suit, then you don't want to open the door. Mine, I think, is rated at 10, 8, 10, other than this thing. So, and of course, I don't have my face shield on and my rubber gloves and ear protection, all the other fun stuff that we're supposed to have on. So, okay, Okay, right here we have the remote serial annunciator. What this panel does is it mimics what the generator is doing as it is concerned with the faults. So, switch not auto simply means that the switch on the generator set is in any position but the automatic position. And it will come up and it will give you a visual light as well as an alarm. I'm going to push this here and it's going to get a little noisy. You'll have that alarm. I think people might be able to hear that one. Okay. Coolant level, which is a shutdown, will ring if the coolant level gets too low. High coolant temperature, low oil pressure, overcrank, and overspeed are all lockout shutdowns. Emergency stop activated means that somebody has pushed the panic button that's on the machine. Okay. Fuel leak sender failure is the sensor in the annular space of the sub-base tank. Sender failure is the sender's inputs from the ECU. If it does not see that input, then it will come up as a sender failure. Okay. Get to the other side on this, then we have the pre-alarms. So you should see this here are yellow and annoying. These here tell you that you're approaching a shutdown point. So it's not at a point where it's shutting down yet, but it's getting close, and if you don't do something, then bad things could happen. Low fuel level, of course, is on the warning side, and it will come on at roughly 50%, like we discussed earlier. That will probably be one you're going to see quite often. Weak battery is a tracked alarm where it looks at that engine when it starts and everything, and it comes up and it knows what that dip is. And weak batteries on this one is probably down around 15 volts, but it's got to see that dip down and everything on it.
What measure that? Is that the?
That's the MGC itself is measuring that. Yep. Battery over voltage and battery charge failure are both out of the charger itself. So if you turn the battery charger off, or even if you get an outage, you're going to see a battery charge failure, because during the outage, the battery charger does not have power until the gen comes back up. That's one where every once in a while we'll get people that will want us to throw a timer in there, that they don't want that to come on, but it's a good audible to tell you that, hey, you know.
So a question I have is on that charger, if you were to, like, say you wanted to replace a battery, what's the process? I mean, do you need a
You must kill power to the battery charger.
battery charger, and then it's
Yep.
pretty much same?
Yep. Yeah, you turn the charger off, you lift the battery terminals off. The ECU and the MGC do not care.
Okay.
When you go back together, you make sure everything's connected back up prior to turn that charger on. Battery charger will try to act as their own power supply. Now, old school days, when we had, the early version microprocessors and cheap battery chargers, you would find that the charger would be firing its SCRs, trying to keep the battery voltage up, and would actually spike that microprocessor and gone. A lot of control boards were replaced for that simple reason. So, yeah, any time you're going to do maintenance on the machine, try to isolate down as far as you can on the system. If you're going to do anything where you're going to be going in after something in a movable part area, up around the fan, the belts, in the alternator end, in the back box, whatever, make sure that you have not only a lockout on your e-stop, because e-stop is not considered a reliable lockout source. Make sure that you take kill your battery charger, take your battery cable off, and throw your lockout on the battery cable itself. Because otherwise, I've never seen one start by itself in the off position, but I don't want to have my hand in where it does. And then when this here comes on, it's the same as on the genset itself. You have an alarm silence. You can silence it, but it may ring back. If you got something coming in and out, it will re-trigger it. If, say, another alarm comes in, say you got a pre-alarm low oil pressure, and then you got the shutdown, it's two separate alarms, so they will trigger after each other. So, as long as you got the little green light on here, it tells you that this thing is communicating. So, of course, the EPS supplying load is that 3% we talked about earlier. So,
one question sometimes is that just the warranty period on certain.
The standard warranty on this machine is 2 years. Now, I can't say whether they have the standard warranty or an extended.
Gotcha.
That's all in the sales contracts and all that stuff. So,
Okay.
and on that subject, warranty does not cover fluids. So if you go in here and, you have to do an oil change because of something, they don't cover the oil. It's just one of the things does not cover. There's certain things that are immune from the warranty, and batteries are one of them. They go into the battery warranty, not the actual genset warranty. And all that is covered in the O&Ms and the warranty statements. So very few things could void your warranty. One thing that used to be in there, and most engines nowadays have pulled that out, is your percentage of biofuel. You still can't go 100% bio in these things. I mean, most manufacturers say, yeah, no. And I can speak from experience on that we've had different entities try to run 100% bio, and it runs fine. But its shelf life is so narrow, and it is so susceptible to temperature that if it gets down to 30 degrees, you'll never get that engine started. I mean, it's fine, the engine's warm, but that tank itself, it's so thick that it can't pick it up. Yeah, it's one of the things we deal with, and it's
Good in theory, but it doesn't always work.
yeah, yep. Yeah, it may be the end all be all for what we got going on right now, though. So,
All right.
okay.
Thanks for